All right, everyone, some big topics going on around our country. One of them is Sean Diddy Combs' trial underway in Manhattan, and we're getting two very different pictures of his sex trafficking trial. So let's get more on this and other stories from Washington this morning. Leland Vittert is, of course, host of Balance, of course, On Balance with Leland Vittert, and the News Nation chief Washington anchor. And Leland, let's talk about this. Prosecutors, all of this trial began yesterday. Now, they're saying he ran a network to satisfy his, quote, sexual demands using staff and drugs and threats and possible violence. Tell us more about what's happening in this trial. And also, Cassie Ventura, she is his ex, who's supposed to be on the stand as well today. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, Sharon, I think what the situation is effectively the prosecution trying to make the case that Sean Diddy Combs was a terrible, awful, violent man who engaged in all of this perverse, for lack of a better term, sexual behavior, and leaving out a little bit of what is required for sex trafficking. The federal charge requires some very specific things to be proven, including the use of coercion or threats. And basically what they're trying to say is he threatened lots of people. He engaged in violence, obviously, with his ex-girlfriend. We've seen that on videotape, on and on and on. Therefore, these are all the horrible things he's done, and he paid people for sex. Put the two together, that's sex trafficking. The defense's argument is a little more nuanced, saying, hey, being a pervert and engaging or paying people to engage in revolting sexual behavior is terrible, but it's not necessarily illegal, and it's not necessarily rising to the level of sex trafficking or federal sex trafficking for somebody to spend the rest of their life in prison. It's a very bold defense. It's not quite the OJ defense, but it's kind of getting close. And I think that's what you're trying to see is a defense that's basically going for the route, not necessarily of proving that he didn't do anything wrong or bad, but hoping that the jury decides that what he did, while very possibly criminal, isn't worthy of the charges that the prosecution has brought.
So much going on with this case. Thanks for breaking at least this portion of it down for us. Now, I'm going to completely switch gears. Let's go to the political route for just a moment. We know that President Trump is right now visiting Saudi Arabia to sign some really key agreements during his trip. Let's talk about that briefly. And also, let's talk about that President Trump has accepted a $400 million luxury jet. He's talking about it from Qatar, and it's raising some legal and ethical concerns, too. So let's talk about this trip for a second, Leland.
Hasn't yet accepted the jet. Right. The issue is going to be a public relations one for Donald Trump, and an optics one. Does the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, want to be seen flying around on a plane that was given to him by the leaders of a country with some fairly questionable track record? The issue for the Qataris is that they would love nothing more than to ingratiate themselves to President Trump and have that be the story. This is a larger 747 than the current Air Force One, similar to the 747s that are being modified right now to become the new Air Force One that are far behind schedule. We made the point on the show last night, regardless of what you think about whether or not he should or should not take this, why would he, in the midst of the prescription drug announcement, the announcement with China where the market soared, bringing an American hostage home from Hamas, big wins on Capitol Hill with his budget, why would he give Trump detractors the easy thing to criticize him on over this plane? That's a slightly different question, playing a little bit to his worst instincts, which is when criticized, he sort of has to lash out and accept whatever is there and defend whatever is there rather than course correct. Different issue. I think in the Middle East right now for President Trump, this is his first trip abroad. The President of the United States never looks more presidential to Americans than when he's abroad representing America, being welcomed by world leaders as the leader of the free world.
All right, and people are still going to be watching this, we know. And Leland, also another subject involving the president dealing with something overseas, but now right here at home, bringing a group of white South Africans to the U.S. as refugees. And some say they're escaping genocide. Others say that's not the case. What are you hearing from those who are around the Trump administration about this? And also, what are you hearing? There are a number of vets who are upset because they're saying we work in Afghanistan and Afghans who helped us should have been able to come here before for these South Africans as well. So what are you hearing about this?
The Afghanistan issue is a new one as far as I've heard. I think the argument right now, and you're hearing this from the Trump administration, is it's fairly rich for anyone on the other side of the aisle to be upset about people being offered asylum in the United States who have a credible fear, given I think it was 12 million who were allowed in illegally during the Biden administration. And were granted some type of protected status, at least millions of them were, whereas these people fit the definition of refugees fleeing from persecution. There are documented cases in South Africa of white farmers being attacked and the government condoning it. So I think the optics of this are important, and if you watch the video of people coming and them all waving American flags saying we want to be here and we're willing to give up what for many was a pretty cushy life in South Africa because they were so afraid to come to the United States with nothing. That is an argument that the White House feels they're on the winning side of.
Well, and on the same side, on the same issue on this, you mentioned about the optics saying that there had been some type of genocide, or there's reports of a lot of African farmers being killed, white Africans. I mean, the last report that came out over just investigation from October of 2024 to December of 2024 said out of 6,900 people who were killed, the majority of them were women and children who were not white, only one farm, which is horrible that anyone's killed anyway. But they're saying that of the 12 farm incidents that were involved in the past year or so, one of them was an African farmer, which is terrible. But the majority of them
I'm not going to get into an argument with you here about reports about what the
but you brought it up.
What is happening in South Africa. I'm trying to give you the politics in the United States. That the White House believes that when they are on the side of people who they see being persecuted, and they can have those folks waving American flags, they think that's a winning political argument for them.
Gotcha. All right, Leland, I appreciate it. And of course, the difference between what is genocide in South Africa as opposed to the Congo or other areas. But I appreciate you just talking to us as always, doing a great job. I appreciate it. You can always go to our website to get more information on Leland and his show, which airs on Niche Nation at 8 p.m. All right, let's switch gears, everybody.